these growing demonstrations, the growingly violent demonstrations, especially that we've been seeing across the country. Now, this is a very difficult moment in any environment, but particularly in the political environment that we're in now, just months before a presidential election. And you saw the president address that head on, saying this is not a time to score political points. But this was also a moment that really Biden allies had been calling for him to do just what he did, which is try to bridge these divides, to talk, yes, about the fact that we are a country that is not an authoritarian nation, as he put it, that we respect the right for protest, the right to free speech, but neither are we a lawless country, as the president put it. I think also it's important, Jose, in this moment to remember where we were 4 years ago at this time, and again, also in a presidential election. We saw protests across the country in the aftermath of the murder of George Floyd, the Black Lives Matter protests, some of those clashes between law enforcement and protesters, including right behind me in Lafayette Park. We remember when Donald Trump was the president, that dramatic scene when he stormed through those protests to speak in front of St. John's Church. Then candidate Joe Biden was strongly denouncing Donald Trump for that posture. And it was a moment when he pointed to the lawlessness, the chaos under Donald Trump. Well, what did we see yesterday, Jose? Candidate Donald Trump out speaking in Michigan and Wisconsin, criticizing the Biden administration for not doing enough to crack down on these protests. So this was really a really important moment for the president, not just to address these pictures that have been leading the newscasts all over the country, but also to reinforce the principles of democracy in his view, that yes, we are seeing a lot of the loud noise, but we also need to respect those who are just students trying to go to school, trying to finish their classes, want to have their graduation. And we also expect to hear the president continue on this theme next week. The White House announcing he will deliver a speech on the rise of anti-Semitism, which is of particular concern to this president, Jose.
And so Steve Patterson, paint a picture for us of what exactly is occurring and occurred overnight at UCLA.
So what's happening right now is we've just been pushed out of this encampment. First of all, the encampment has been completely disassembled by police who swept through overnight, starting in the very early morning hours with riot gear, obviously with flashbangs, using non-lethal weaponry to push their way into barricades that have now been pushed down, now being reconstructed, as now you see all that's left is sort of a mess behind me after the protesters were forcibly removed, many of them arrested. In fact, we're hearing over 130 arrests. Right now you can see them erecting this barricade again because they're going to clean this entire area. They just pushed all the media out. They're putting up the barriers again so they can sweep through here and make this sanitized and safe again. And that was really the mission of this. They wanted to push protesters out.
Let's see here. I missed some of it or part of it or something. I don't know. I thought I may have went too far on the president actually speaking. I don't think I went back enough. Okay, let's back up. Let's back up. Let's see where we are right here. Go right there. Right there.
Well, there you saw President Biden from the Roosevelt Room.
Go a little more. Keep going. 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 Right about there.
But has already been mentioned over and over again that has, well, credibility issues. How does the prosecution prepare for that?
Well, that's what they're doing. They are laying the foundation for the star witness, Michael.
I hate to interrupt you, but President Biden is about to speak. Let's go to the White House, the Roosevelt Room.
Okay. I've already seen this. He only speaks like 3 minutes. Very short, very, very short speech. And you can tell by the things that he's talking about, he's trying to cover up some of the mistakes that has been made, not necessarily with his administration, but in all the other administrations before him that has put us where we are today. This is what I got to say about authoritarian, because he's going to mention authoritarian. Whenever you have either a federal government or a state government or a local government that has done what they have done to one of your citizens, if that's not authoritarian attributes, I will kiss your tail and give you 30 minutes to draw up a crowd. Whenever Homeland Security intervened in the Windmill Ministries missions in 1989 in Madison County, Jackson, Tennessee, that was an authoritarian move. In 1991, whenever they decided that they was going to try to brand me of somebody that was a harm to one of their presidents towards going to the White House and assassinating George Walker Bush, that was an authoritarian movement. Whenever chokes me up to think about it. Whenever somebody mentions about going to destroy the very axis of evil, the very thing that our government was supposed to be founded upon towards supporting godliness and going up against ungodliness, and that individual has to go to downtown Chicago and being studied like a laboratory rat by Dr. Dana because of the orders coming from the federal government in Western Kentucky, that is an authoritarian move. Whenever that same individual was down in Oklahoma working, paying taxes, state and federal taxes, working for a body shop, and because he made 2 non-threatening telephone calls that was in the span of a 90-day period, and they drag him from his job from Oklahoma back to Kentucky, and then make him go through another psychiatric test in which they'd already done this once by going to Chicago, but they wasn't satisfied in that. Now they got to go before their state psychiatry. That way they're in more control of the state psychiatry than they was the federal psychiatry. So now I go before a state psychiatry. That psychiatrist says immediately, oh, I think you're delusional and delirious, and I'm going to order for you to be put on this drug. I don't want to be put on this drug. I don't want this drug. I want to go back making my $2,000 a week paying Oklahoma and federal taxes. Well, we ain't going to allow for that to happen, Mr. Jackson. We're going to order for you to be put on this drug. Well, I ain't going to take this drug. Then they go to Judge Woodall, and Judge Woodall in Trigg County. Judge Woodall signs off towards making him take this medication, even if you have to lay him down on a bed and intravenously feed it up his you-know-what. He's going to take the medication. That same medication made me go from 240 to 340 in less than about 4 to 6 weeks. And then I gained more weight on top of that, which was an add-on to the injury that I already had that now presently I had to go get an operation on for having my left ankle fused. Being forced to take this medication against my will, that is an authoritarian move. That is an authoritarian attribute. Whenever you come back home to your home state, and basically the whole neighborhood, or practically the whole neighborhood, flares up against you coming back for 3 years, for 3 consecutive years, after telephone call after telephone call after telephone call, being resorted to this address alone. And you cannot get no decent response from the people that's supposed to be protecting you, to the point that they let it build and build and build to the point that it basically causes your youngest sibling to die at the age of 51. That is an authoritarian resistance, is what that is, because they was hoping that either my brother or myself or both would have shot ourselves in the foot, and that would have been the end of the Jackson saga. That would have been the end of the Jackson dynasty. That would have been the end of the Windmill Ministries missions. That's what they was hoping, because this has all been based around anti-Semitism that actually began in 1983 whenever I made a telephone call in 1983. There's no doubt, listen to me carefully, there's no doubt that protesters that want to dislodge regular community services, or want to go in and vandalize, tear up, or even cause bodily injury or harm or even death, should not be permitted on that level. But on the other level, listen to me, I'm talking about both cases here. On the other level, our government should not have done what they done to a Christian nation pertaining to their Supreme Court. I believe it was in Obama's administration that wanted to clarify that homosexuality, the LGBTQ community, was okay to live together and to declare tax exemptions for one another if you're gay or lesbian. It was not right whenever the government, what was it, 40 years ago or even further, maybe 50, whenever they said it was okay for women to kill children out of their own passion because they deemed it either necessary or it was an inconvenience in their life. Abortions was placed there only for the benefit of the mother and the child or both, even under the pretense of being raped or incest. It was still placed there for the benefit of the mother and the child pertaining to abortion. This country took that way beyond the pale pertaining to what that they was doing to the lives of the innocent children. I think it's something like 40,000 abortions that happened just in Florida alone, if I'm not mistaken. Just in Florida alone, every year. That's 40,000 people that you're killing. That could actually be some of the people that could come up with some of the solutions towards having anti serum of being able to fight cancer, tuberculosis, or any of the above. That now you're killing those people, and because of it, we're never going to have a cure for tuberculosis or cancer or some of the other diseases out there. Why? Because you killed the individual that was originally placed upon to the planet that was going to be a healing contributor to society. You talk about authoritarian principles. All right, let's look at the equal rights movement pertaining to the women. If the women did not stand up the way that they did, whenever that they did, I guarantee you women would still be looked upon as being an object, regardless whether it was a sex object or a labor object. They would still be looked upon as being an object rather than being an equal. Let's look at what happened with Martin Luther King that got assassinated in Memphis. If it was not for people that went and destroyed property and caused such of an uproar, the Black Lives movement pertaining to Black Lives Matter never would have succeeded. We would still probably be having slavery in America if those people did not violate the principle of protesting rules and regulations. So there does come a time whenever the people needs and has to speak out pertaining to a subject matter, regardless what that subject matter may be. Because obviously, all the stuff that I've been putting out, all the talk that I've been talking, all the digital data that I've been making and putting out there to the general public has not helped, not one bit, towards getting either an apology from the state of Tennessee after the governor declared me as me being a threat, that actually banned me from all federal facilities in Tennessee after I got in a squeeze out in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, in basically pulling out my sleeves and doing some detective work or some investigating work out there pertaining to the Oklahoma cover-up. I've not gotten any type of an apology because of what the courts did not do that should have done here in Weakley County. I have not gotten no type of an official apology either from the federal government working through the state of Kentucky or the state government or the local government pertaining to Judge Woodall. I've not gotten any type of an apology from the state of Oklahoma or even the city of Oklahoma pertaining to me going out there investigating them and finding out the truth. So whenever you talk about we are not an authoritarian nation, you may not be an authoritarian nation up front, but in behind the scenes, just as the federal judge told me in Paducah, Kentucky, Mr. Jackson, I guarantee you we can make your life a whole lot more miserable than you can make ours. And that's the technique that the federal government uses over here in America pertaining to it being an open, fair democracy. And the fact of the matter is, if you don't put some sort of a squeeze on Big Brother pertaining to Uncle Sam is going to continue to violate those principles and take advantage of its own people. Now let's listen to this speech pertaining to authoritarian government.
What's going on our college campuses here? We've all seen images, and they put to the test two fundamental American principles. The first is the right to free speech and for people to peacefully assemble and make their voices heard. The second is the rule of law. Both must be upheld. We are not an authoritarian nation where we silence people or squash dissent. The American people are heard. In fact, peaceful protest is in the best tradition of how Americans respond to consequential issues.
To a certain level, to a certain degree. But if you're like me, I just as well be speaking to a tree. Because obviously all this material that I've been putting out there that I can prove is either being ignored or overlooked. Some people still laugh and snigger and giggle about it, thinking, well, he ain't never going to be able to succeed in what he's wanting to succeed in. Well, I got news for you. My power play is not Johnny Conquering. My power play is not being involved with the political leaders in this country. My power play is God Almighty. And if that's what it takes to bring this country to its senses, is to bring it down, then that will be what occurs, because it was not of my choosing that I chose the last resort towards praying to God, God, you're going to have to fight my battles for me. No matter what it takes, no matter what it takes for this message to get forth the way that you desire for this message to get forth, not just to the nation of America, but to the world, then do what it may. Even at the point of ruining insurance companies because of all the calamity that continues to keep exploding here in America again and again and again. After I was arrested by Martin PD, drugged from Huntington, Tennessee, Carroll County, told the officials, David Moore, I don't think David Moore was present, but I just as well have been speaking to David Moore pertaining to the precinct, that my intentions was not harmful, and they still pursued a charge of falsifying files on me to the degree of basically marking me as a homegrown terrorist in my own home county. That is an authoritarian move towards trying to shut up somebody or destroy their anointing. Especially when one of the officers that I was talking to at the time said, wait a minute, guys. Mr. Jackson has been doing this now for quite some time. This was in 2005. I started working in the public in 1989. 89, 99, 2005. So you're talking about 15 years. 15 years I'd been out in the eyes of the public with this message. And now all of a sudden, I got the Weakley County, the state of Tennessee, that's basically saying I'm a potential homegrown terrorist because I was passing out Bible literature and I made a statement about being on the news and that it was going to be an explosion of controversy. It has been an explosion of controversy ever since I made a telephone call to the White House about the Antichrist in 1983 in my life. Since 1983, my life has been turned completely around. I'm 63 years old, 40 years ago. So that's taken about 2/3 of my life that has been in constant turmoil over a non-authoritarian government that this man wants to preach to everybody by saying, oh, you got the right to free speech. Oh, yeah, you got the right to go out and talk to a tree or a rock or just speak to yourself, but you don't have the right to cause any type of commotions. In one way, I go along with that, pertaining to how big the commotions are. But then again, on the other hand, I look at the other side of it, and it's like, you know what? If the little man don't use a little bit of pressure, regardless whether it's Black Lives Matter, regardless whether it's George Floyd, regardless whether it's women's rights to be able to vote and be treated equal, I guarantee you we would still be a open authoritarian government such as what it was before our people stood up in 1776 and said enough is enough. That's whenever we started in trying to be a non-authoritarian government. But look what it took. It took bloodshed. It took bloodshed going up against the Redcoats. And then between then and the Civil War, there was actually another movement of our own people trying to side up with, once more, the Redcoats. The King of England, George W. III or something like that. And then that led into an actual out-and-out bloodbath pertaining to a civil war. Once more, it's as if in this experiment of this non-authoritarian government, we have to be loud enough, smart enough, and strong enough to speak out, and in some cases even speak out, I guess the right word would be unsophisticated or uncivilized. That if we don't speak out in that tone of voice, we will never be treated fairly by our own government. And you can talk to women about that, you can talk to the black race about that, you can speak to others about that, that if we was not loud enough and strong enough, we never would have accomplished the things that we have accomplished in the past 150 years. Now you can get on national TV and you can tell your side of the story. But you know what? I can get on social media and I can tell mine. I can tell my story too as well. Now, whether or not anybody wants to believe it, support it, or act upon it, that'll be up to them. But as things continue to grow grossly, negatively in the red, and you got to admit, since 1988, basically since the mid to early 80s, we have been going steadily downhill pertaining to no new taxes. And now we're how many $1 trillion in debt? Now our government has allowed for how many illegal immigrants to come over here that we don't have a clue and who they are or what they've done? Now we've got how many guns on the streets? How many opioids on the streets? I realize that this government has tried to clean its act up, but in lots of different ways it hasn't. I agree that the war over in the Middle East is a horrible, horrible thing to witness. It's a horrible thing to witness. Especially when if you get to watching all the pain and suffering. But at the same time, you have to recognize that war is war. Whenever you declare war upon a nation or war upon a group of people, you can expect the consequences on both sides. There'll be carnal, collateral damage on both sides anytime there's a war. And if you can't accept that, well, that's going to be up to you. And I realize people are protesting and wanting the war to stop, but at the same time, you must identify that the people over in Israel has a right to protect themselves too. And they didn't start the war. They're only trying to finish the war. Now, the fact of the matter is this government has failed those people over there, because if they would have stood with and behind the Windmill Ministries going all the way back to the 9 tapes that wound up circulating to the White House, we would have already seen a two-state solution. We would have already seen peace and utopia up onto the world. Not an artificial peace, but a real peace. But the so-called Christians and the politicians over here in America didn't want to support that. Well, now, 30 plus years later, look at what it's gotten you. The very people that was opposed, basically being an anti-Judaist, being anti-Juby against the things that Juby was teaching, even though Juby was teaching the very same things that they were supposed to be believing and teaching their children about, pertaining to the Antichrist, the one world government, the New World Order, the opening of the 4 horsemen, the 7 seals, the 2 witnesses pertaining to the New World Order. They didn't want to accept that. They said they did. They said they did. But talk is cheap, especially when the white man speaketh with forked tongue. The red man, notice this about the corruption that come over here to America, and that was the reason why that they pegged the white man the way that they did. And in some cases, I actually find it to be appalling, the fact that I am a white man and been treated this way here by my own citizenship, not just here in Northwest Tennessee, not just here in Tennessee, but in my country. And it's not that I'm ashamed of me, and it's not that I'm ashamed of my color, of my race. The fact I'm ashamed of what various people has done in the resistance of this, and then thought that somebody like me was going to be stupid enough to admit, oh yeah, it's my fault, oh yeah, it's my fault. It's not my fault. I cannot be in control of other people's actions towards what they either do or don't do, and I'm not going to be held accountable for the things that they have either done or are doing or should do that they didn't do. Neither nor are they going to be accountable for my actions. Now, once more, I got freedom of speech, right? I can go out here on the tree and I can preach to it until I'm black and blue in the face. But if this is not an authoritarian county pertaining to Weakley County, how come I can go up to Dresden, Tennessee and get permission by the local mayor, the city mayor, being on city property, on the sidewalk, and I'm speaking without an open device, without an amplifier, and because I'm speaking loud, and because the topic matter that I'm speaking about blood coming down from the coming down from the courthouse because of what that they have done, all of a sudden I was told to go home and leave, if not suffer the consequences. Even after telling the opposing officers that immediately come out there, which was several, I think it was 3 squad cars, explaining to them, well, the mayor just got through giving me permission to speak out here. What am I doing wrong? Well, you're upsetting a lot of people, Mr. Jackson. Oh, really? Well, they don't have to listen. Well, it don't matter. You're so loud, you're causing a disturbance. And we're telling you to disassemble. And if you don't disassemble, you can expect the consequences. So what did Mr. Jackson do? Mr. Jackson disassembled. Even though Mr. Jackson had got permission to speak. But because of the subject matter that I was speaking about, it made people feel uncomfortable in Dresden, Tennessee. I just wonder how Dresden, Tennessee feels now today after a major tornado come through and basically wiped out about half of that city block, which was just right in front of the courthouse itself, not counting all the damage it had done to the whole county. If you continue to do like the Bible talks about, in resistance of doing right, in resistance of being against God and God's people, God will bring retribution down upon that society in one form or another. Now, they can deny it all they want to up there. Just like they can deny it all they want to over in Kenton, Tennessee. They can deny it all they want to right here in Northwest Tennessee, pertaining to where I was raised up at, in the Cydonia, Hop-In, Beach Ridge, Davy Crockett territory. But the fact of the matter is, the truth is the truth. And what you're listening to, pertaining to this leader right now, is only a half-truth. Listen to him again, please.
But,
let's listen.
we can respond to consequential issues. But, neither are we a lawless country. We're a civil society, and order must prevail. Throughout our history, we've often faced moments like this because we are a big, diverse, free-thinking, and freedom-loving nation. In moments like this, there are always those who rush in to score political points. But this isn't a moment for politics. It's a moment for clarity. So let me be clear.
All right, if it's a moment for clarity, let's look at both sides of it. The fact of the matter is, things would not have evolved the way that things have evolved here in America if people wasn't willing to go the extra mile and basically violate regular protesting methods. Regular protesting decent, civilized rules and regulations. We would not have gained what we have gained towards getting the attention of Big Brother, Uncle Sam, again and again and again, if our people, being American patriots, wasn't willing to stand in the limelight and suffer the consequences on account of what that they was trying to achieve. In other words, you can look at the history of the black movement, and you can see where not only an individual was assassinated right here in America, down in Memphis, Tennessee, but you can see where many of them was imprisoned. Some of them didn't do nothing no more than just stand up and say, you know what, I'm not going to the back end of the bus. I'm staying at the front end of the bus because I should be treated just as equal. I'm not going to drink out of this water fountain. I'm going to drink out of this water fountain. I'm not going to that bathroom. I'm going to the same bathroom that everybody else is going to because I'm a human being. If people didn't stand up and become abrupt in their protest movements, they never would have accomplished what that they have accomplished here in America. Now, you can snigger, you can laugh, you can deny, you can say, well, I'm crazy, whatever you want to say, but the facts is the facts. And let's not just look at part of the facts. And I agree with Trump. Law and order and safety should be the primary concept of our lifestyle every day. It don't matter if it's on the highway, it don't matter if it's in the streets, it don't matter if it's in our churches, it don't matter if it's in our city halls, it don't matter. Safety and prosperity should be our primary goal. And whenever it no longer is, that's whenever it's time for the people to stand up. And I got news for you. Whenever you get to looking around and you seeing all these factories that have been dilapidated, that are basically just sitting there, as Donald Trump said, it looked like tombstones whenever you fly over it with a small airplane. And you'd see building after building after building that used to occupy some 200, 300, 400 people that was making shoes, making shirts, making pajamas, making sheets, making whatever. And now that same building is empty because the bigger conglomerates pertaining to the retail industry went overseas and stabbed the rest of us in the back pertaining to the labor. But yet now you want to tell me about law and order. You want to tell me about a non-authoritarian government. Okay, if you are a non-authoritarian government, maybe you should act like one. And the fact of the matter is, yes, the protesters was causing a disturbance. Yes, the protesters, in ways, was tearing up stuff and shouldn't have been doing what they was doing. But it didn't reach the level of violence until the mob squad was called in. When the mob squad was called in, then it got ugly. You know why? Because the mob squad knows how to organize, and the mob squad's got bigger guns than what their regular citizens do. So you tell me that it's not an authoritarian government. But yet no, if the people stand up long enough and strong enough, it could actually turn into our government turning against its own people, similar towards how Lincoln done his own citizens here in America. Now, I'm not saying that what Lincoln done wasn't justifiable, because I think it was. I think it was justifiable. But it took more than just somebody standing on a balcony and talking about it. It actually took bloodshed. And if that's where you want to go with this, Mr. President, pertaining to bloodshed and violence, well, then continue to not be listening to these people, regardless of whether they're right or wrong. But you're going to have to acknowledge that the things that they're protesting about, they do not want to see the war escalate. They do not want to see innocent lives continue to starve and die because of some nitwits that don't know how to get along with each other. And that's basically what it comes down to. You got two groups of nitwits over there that refuses to compromise and get along with each other. Whenever the truth be known, they ought to be training their citizens to be productive citizens. Don't just lounge around underneath a tree and ride a camel. Teach them how to read and write. Teach them how to work. Teach them how to become carpenters and plumbers and bricklayers. Teach that society over there how to become self-sustainable. Instead of putting all your energy towards war and destruction, put your energies towards something that's productive, that'll benefit everybody and not just one group of people. So obviously, this non-authoritarian government has failed to succeed in what they wanted to succeed. Now, I got one other thing to say before I let you finish listening to this short message pertaining to pertaining to Mr. Biden. Sorry about that. Our government, our non-authoritarian government, took it upon themselves after 9/11, blaming, first of all, the wrong people about 9/11, and then secondly, went over to Afghanistan that was going to conform a group of people in which the ideal was a good ideal. Technically speaking, it was a great ideal. But we see what this non-authoritarian government has got itself into. Especially whenever you spend 10 years over there, several $1 trillion, God only knows at the loss of life, not counting injury, and then walk away and leave all that artillery over there, and then less than 11 days later, the country gets taken back over by the Taliban. It's pretty obvious that this non-authoritarian government has failed to bring peace and utopia and stability, regardless whether it's the stability here in America pertaining to our own streets, or stability in the Middle East, or stability over in Afghanistan, or wherever. We don't even see stability right now over in Russia pertaining to the Ukrainian people. Why is that? Why is that, Mr. President? It's because you're beating the horse at the wrong end. You're going about doing these things incorrectly. And if you're going to fix anything, it has to be done from a supernatural level, and it has to begin internally, pertaining to what actually motivates humanity. What actually drives humanity in the right direction or the wrong direction. And if you don't work on that aspect, you can beat, you can holler, you can protest, you can get in the floor, you can pitch a fit, you can throw a tantrum, and at the end of the day, you have not succeeded in nothing. You still got chaos, you still got blood in the streets, you still got a country that's trillions of dollars in debt, you still got drugs, you still got people basically heading in the wrong direction. So if it wasn't for, I'm going to use this expression, loudmouth protesters, not necessarily illegal protesting, but loudmouth protesting, I guarantee you the things that's been accomplished over here in this great nation, and it is a great nation, would never have been succeeded. It would be nothing no more than me going out and speaking to a tree, or holding up a sign by myself at the courtroom, and because I was talking about the wrong issues, or I got a little bit loud voicefully, oh, Mr. Jackson, you have to disperse. You're making people feel uncomfortable, and you need to go. And if you don't go, you will suffer the consequences. If that is not an authoritarian rule, I will kiss your you-know-what, Mr. President, and give you 30 minutes to draw up a crowd.
Peaceful protest in America. Violent protest is not protected. Peaceful protest is. It's against the law when violence occurs. Destroying property is not a peaceful protest. It's against the law.
I agree.
Vandalism, trespassing.
I agree.
Breaking windows, shutting down campuses.
I agree.
Cancellation of classes and graduations. None of this is a peaceful protest.
I agree.
Threatening people, intimidating people, instilling fear in people is not peaceful protest. It's against the law. Dissent is essential to democracy, but dissent must never lead to disorder or to denying the rights of others so students can finish the semester and their college education. Look, it's basically a matter of fairness. It's a matter of what's right. There's the right to protest, but not the right to cause chaos. People have the right to get an education, the right to get a degree, the right to walk across the campus safely without fear of being attacked.
I agree.
Let's be clear about this as well. There should be no place on any campus, no place in America for anti-Semitism or threats of violence against Jewish students.
I agree.
There is no place for hate speech or violence of any kind, whether it's anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, or discrimination against Arab Americans or Palestinian Americans.
I agree.
It's simply wrong. There's no place for racism in America. It's all wrong. It's un-American. I understand people have strong feelings and deep convictions. In America, we respect the right and protect the right for them to express that. But it doesn't mean anything goes. It needs to be done without violence, without destruction, without hate, and within the law. You know, make no mistake, as president, I will always defend free speech. And I will always be just as strong in standing up for the rule of law. That's my responsibility to you, the American people, my obligation to the Constitution.
The rule of law pertaining to your obligation to the Constitution has already been broke, Mr. President, because we do not have law and order in this country. Way before these protest activists ever start doing what they was doing on campus, you can go back to January the 6th. You can look at other controversial events that's happened in America. You can look at how basically social media, the internet, has come in and violated our principles pertaining to our privacy. It's TikTok is basically corrupting the minds of our youth. There is no guardrails on a lot of this stuff that's come out. They're beginning to start to modify it a little bit. But whenever it comes to you protecting your own citizens, whenever it comes to order, you're already out of order, Mr. President. There is no order in a nation that has how many suicides a day pertaining to their veterans committing suicide? Something like 24, 25 veterans a day that commit suicide. That's the average. That was the primary purpose for David and I trying to help society out here. Was one of those primary reasons was based around our veterans that wasn't being taken care of. But boy, oh boy, this community didn't want that now, did they? And if this community didn't want that, that meant that that courthouse up there in Dresden didn't want that. Like my son said, at the end of the day, when it was all said and done with, Dad, it's not that you actually done anything wrong because you was just concerned about 3 little children across the road. It's just the fact that they got aggravated up there in Dresden because they had too many telephone calls and wasn't nothing getting accomplished, and it was a whole lot easier towards going after one person than it was going after half the community down here. Now that is the truth. Because as many telephone calls and as many incidences that happened pertaining to the law being brought down here again and again and again within a 3-year period, somebody was not doing their job. And the fact of the matter is, whenever I come back here, I come back into a beehive. I had no idea that World War III had basically broken out down here towards a group of people that was against my people. I didn't know that it had become this severe. If I did, I never would have come back to this area. I'd have stayed up in East Tennessee, or I'd have went to North Carolina, or I'd have stayed in Florida, or I'd have stayed in Arizona, or Denver, Colorado, or out in California, or down in Alabama somewhere, or anywhere, other than to come into chaos. I didn't know I was going to be walking into chaos, but I did. The very chaos that courthouse up there is supposed to protect any of its sovereign citizens from did not do its job at the expense of a young man dying on account of it. Now that's what David Jeffrey Jackson's peers, of those that claim that they cared about him about, that's what they have to face off on every day. Whether or not they want to believe it or not. Those will be the charges that will be placed up into their lives because they drove that man off into an early death because of all the aggravation and the turmoil and basically being tortured, psychologically tortured, psychological warfare right down here pertaining to what he was going through because his brother come back in 2014. Now that's the gospel. That's the truth. And I can prove it on paper to a certain degree pertaining to what all went on. Again and again and again, having 4, 5, 6, having at least I've seen at least 5 cars out here. I've had a supervisor come out here. I've had the probation officer come out here. Whenever you have that going on for 3 years, sometimes as much as every week or 2 or 3 times a month, and that goes on for 3 years, you got a problem somewhere down here. There's a problem. And the problem wasn't Dennis James Jackson. The problem was the citizens in this area, not all of them, but a great deal of them that thought that they was going to torment our lives to the degree that we wound up crossing over that line. We wound up shooting ourselves in the foot. And you know what? It backfired. It backfired on the people over in Kenton, Tennessee. It backfired on the people in Martin, Tennessee. And it backfired on the people in Dresden, Tennessee. It backfired because I'm still standing, I'm still walking, I'm still alive, and I'm still telling my story. Now, whether or not I can get anybody to sympathize with the story or not, that's going to be another $64,000 question, I guess. But the fact of the matter is, this country has lost control of protecting and taking care of its citizens. And until the country decides to take the country back over again, and I'm pretty sure it ain't going to do no good to go out here and talk to a tree. Whenever somebody like me goes to the courthouse and gets permission from an authority figure, and then 15 minutes later gets ordered, not asked, ordered, leave. And if you don't leave, you're going to suffer the consequences on account of leaving. If that's not an authoritarian attribute, I will kiss your tail, Mr. President, and give you 30 minutes to draw up a crowd. I agree. Law and order and safety should be the primary concept of any nation, of any country, of any state, of any county. But when you talk and you talk and you talk until you're black and blue in the face, similar to the color of the suit that you have on right now, and you still haven't accomplished nothing, Mr. President, then maybe it's time to turn the level up just a little bit. That's whenever I start using the concept of a loudmouth protester. That it takes sometimes a loudmouth protester before you're going to get anything done. Just like whenever I was raised up in this area, and I guess it was this way all over Tennessee. You could basically walk into any bar, as long as you looked like you was 18, it didn't matter if you was 15. You looked like you was 18, you acted like somebody that was a grown up, you took care of yourself, you could walk into any bar and play pool and drink 2 or 3 beers and go home. All of a sudden, that changed. It went from 18 to 21. Even though it's okay for somebody to join the army at 18 and handle a gun and take a chance on killing somebody or getting killed. What started that movement? Put your thinking cap on. Wasn't it called mad women drinking and driving? And that's whenever the laws become much, much stiffer here in America, because people got loud and proud. And they got to telling people, you know what, this is going to have to stop. Too many injuries are on the road. Too many people are causing death and injuries pertaining to drinking and driving. And you have to admit that it was the right movement, even though you had to have loudmouth protesters. It was the right movement because it has saved lives. That's the whole concept to what they're protesting about right now, is to save lives. Save lives over in the Middle East. Save lives pertaining to helping those people. You have to recognize what they're involved in, even though They got loud. Even though they broke some of the principles, you know as well as I do, to ever get anything done in this country, you have to be willing to basically go to jail over. And that's what's happened in my life again and again and again, regardless whether it was out in Oklahoma, regardless whether it was right here in Tennessee, regardless whether it was East Tennessee or up in Kentucky, I've had to go to jail. And that's part of being a maverick or I can't think of the right word right now towards being an activist. That's part of what goes along with being an activist, is you got to take the chance on going to jail. Because you're not going to get hurt if you don't. And that's the truth. Regardless whether you want to accept that or not, that's the truth.
Thank you very much.
Thank you too.
Forced you to reconsider any of the policies with regard to the region?
No. Thank you.
Mr. President, do you think the National Guard should intervene?
No.
Mr. President, do you agree with what Mr. President is calling for?
Mr. President.
But I guarantee you he would call on the National Guard. He would call on his federal troops if he had to stop something from getting out of hand if it got that far out of hand. I guarantee he would. Just like Lincoln took his federal troops and said, turn them on the people. Turn them on the people. So don't preach to me about this being a non-authoritarian government towards looking at the past of the bloodshed that's occurred.
Well, there you saw President Biden in the Roosevelt Room, a very short but very concrete speech. I want to bring in NBC's Mike Bembley, NBC's Steve Patterson, live at the UCLA campus, and Hagar Shamali, a professor at Columbia University. So
I've said enough. Good luck to all of us. God bless America. God bless our troops. And God bless our endeavors towards where we go from here. But until true accountability issues gets faced off upon, we will never see true justice either in the eyes of the government or the eyes of the government's people or in the eyes of God himself. So it is time for the Christian nation to stand up and to be heard. I do recognize the fact that the Christian nation needs to stay within the guidelines of whatever laws is in their domain, regardless whether it be American laws, Russian laws, Vietnam War laws, India laws, or whatever. I recognize that. But at the same time, I also recognize that if you're not a loudmouth protester, and if you don't stick together, odds are you're only going to make a lot of noise, but you ain't going to get nothing accomplished. We have seen that again and again and again, regardless whether it was in this country or in other countries, that it takes sometimes a loudmouth protester to take a chance on going to jail before that movement is ever going to succeed. God bless America. Heaven help us all. And shalom.